The horizon shimmered like molten glass as Rebecca drove deeper into Utah's endless dust. The car's engine hummed beneath a sky too vast to comprehend. Everything she owned fit in the back seat, beside the memories she could not leave behind. The road stretched forward, merciless and silent. Every mile felt like a question she wasn't ready to answer. The wind pressed against the windows, carrying whispers of heat and sand. Rebecca's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, the ring finger bare for the first time in 23 years. Somewhere between the static of a broken radio and her heartbeat, a tear formed but never fell. She had left behind a life that no longer wanted her. Ahead, there was nothing but sun and uncertainty. When she stopped for gas, her reflection in the dusty window startled her. Lines she hadn't noticed before traced stories across her face. She smiled faintly, realizing she no longer recognized the woman staring back. That, perhaps, was the point of all this, to lose oneself so completely that rebirth becomes the only option left. On the passenger seat rested an old letter, yellowed by time, the handwriting familiar and trembling. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. When life dries your soul, go where the salt meets the sun. Rebecca didn't know why, but the words felt like a map written for this exact moment. As the car turned off the main highway, the desert opened before her like a test. A single dirt road led to a small house, half swallowed by dunes. The letter wasn't found by chance. It had been placed there, waiting for her arrival. Rebecca took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. The desert had called, and she had answered. Inside her chest, fear and hope collided like storm clouds. The sky began to dim, painting gold into violet. She parked the car and stepped out, the earth beneath her boots hot and alive. Somewhere within that silence, something old began to stir, something that sounded almost like her name. Rebecca looked at the house ahead, its windows dark and waiting. She whispered to the wind, unsure if it was a prayer or a promise. The world felt both infinite and intimate at once. As the first stars blinked awake above her, she realized she had finally arrived, not just at a place, but at a beginning. The front door resisted, swollen with years of neglect. When it finally opened, a cloud of dust rose like a spirit escaping its prison. Rebecca coughed, covering her mouth, the smell of dryness and time filling her lungs. The air inside was thick with the memories of people long gone. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a voice asking who she was. Sunlight filtered through broken blinds, revealing the ghosts of old furniture and forgotten corners. Rebecca traced her fingers along a cracked picture frame, her grandmother smiling in a field of lavender. She remembered summers spent there as a child, the laughter, the scent of soap and salt water. A single tear landed on the glass, leaving a small circle of clarity amid the dust. She began cleaning, each sweep of the broom feeling like the erasure of something heavy. Hours passed unnoticed as she filled trash bags and rediscovered pieces of a life left behind. Beneath a loose floorboard, her hand brushed against something unexpected. A small leather-bound notebook tied with string. It pulsed with the kind of mystery that waits to be read. She untied it gently. Inside, handwritten recipes danced between stains of oil and dried petals. Healing soaps, recipes of the desert. Rebecca smiled despite herself, the words both strange and familiar. Her grandmother had always spoken of the craft of care. Maybe this was what she meant, healing through creation, through touch. Outside, the desert sun began to fade, washing the world in hues of amber and rose. Rebecca sat on the porch steps, the notebook resting on her knees. The breeze carried a scent of sage and something else, possibility. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling both small and whole. As night fell, she lit a candle and placed it by the window. The flame danced wildly, casting long shadows across the room. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Grandma," not knowing if she was heard, but hoping. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like loneliness, it felt like peace. When she finally lay down, the stars outside looked closer than ever. Rebecca's last thought before sleep was simple, yet powerful. Perhaps the house wasn't waiting to be restored. Perhaps she was. Morning came with the hum of cicadas and a sun that spared no mercy. Rebecca brewed coffee on an old stove that wheezed like it might collapse at any moment. She opened the notebook again, studying the faded ink, the smudged fingerprints of women who had come before her. Each recipe was written in care, like a poem disguised as instruction. The first read, 1 handful of desert salt, 1 cup of oil, 1 heart unafraid of healing. She laughed softly. "A heart unafraid," she repeated, as if testing the words on her tongue. The ingredients were simple, but the meaning was vast. Rebecca gathered what little she could find: salt, a bottle of olive oil, a sprig of dried sage. Her first attempt was clumsy. The mixture hardened too quickly, and the scent was overwhelming. She burned her hand slightly on the pot's edge, muttering under her breath. Frustration threatened to pull her back into old patterns of giving up. But then, as the steam rose, it carried with it a memory: her grandmother's laugh. Light and free as wind chimes, she closed her eyes and let the memory stay. The scent of lavender drifted through her mind, soft and familiar. Rebecca realized it wasn't about making soap. It was about remembering how to care. For years, she had cared for others: students, family, everyone but herself. Now, in this silence, she was learning to care again, beginning with her own hands. When she finally washed the failed mixture from the bowl, she noticed something beautiful. Her hands smelled like the past, but they trembled with the future. A strange calmness settled inside her. The notebook wasn't just a relic, it was an invitation to become whole. That night, she placed the first imperfect bar on the windowsill. It was rough and uneven, but somehow beautiful. Under the moonlight, the salt crystals sparkled faintly, like tiny constellations trapped in soap. She smiled, whispering, "It's a start." Rebecca went to bed with sore hands and a quiet heart. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a coyote howled. The desert listened, and in its vast stillness, she finally felt heard. Weeks passed, marked by new attempts and small triumphs. Rebecca's table filled with colorful bars wrapped in paper she hand-stamped with her initials. Her neighbor, June, stopped by one afternoon, admiring the work. "There's a fair in town this weekend," she said. "You should show these." Rebecca laughed nervously, brushing off the idea. But June's eyes held something she hadn't seen in years: belief. On Saturday morning, Rebecca packed her boxers and drove into town. The market buzzed with laughter, music, and the smell of fresh bread. Her small stand looked out of place among polished displays, yet it felt right. She arranged her soaps carefully, her heart thudding like a drum. Hours passed. People looked, smiled politely, and walked away. Doubt began to settle like dust on her shoulders. The old voice inside her whispered, "You're not enough." Just as she started packing, a little girl approached, her fingers tracing a lavender bar. "It smells like a hug," she said softly. Rebecca froze, her eyes filling with tears she didn't expect. That single sentence cracked something open. The girl's mother bought 2 bars and thanked her. It wasn't about the sale. It was the connection brief, genuine, healing. Rebecca watched them walk away, her heart strangely light. She stayed until the sun began to set, handing out soaps just to see the smiles. By nightfall, her basket was nearly empty. Driving home, the desert looked different, softer, almost kind. The headlights carved paths through the darkness, and Rebecca felt a pulse of gratitude. Failure had turned into discovery. Every scent, every touch, was teaching her how to live again. When she returned home, she placed the last unsold bar beside the notebook. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I'll make more." Her voice carried in the still air, full of something she hadn't felt in a long time: courage. Outside, the wind rose and brushed against the window. It almost sounded like applause. The next morning brought the kind of light that made everything feel possible. Rebecca was mixing oils when she heard a knock at the door. A man stood there, dusty from travel, his eyes tired but kind. "Sorry," he said, "I was just passing through. Do you have some water?" She nodded, inviting him in, curiosity tugging at her chest. He introduced himself as Michael, a photographer documenting small towns across the Southwest. His camera hung from his neck like a memory keeper. While drinking, he noticed the soaps lined neatly on the counter. "These are yours?" he asked, lifting one gently. "They look alive." Rebecca laughed nervously, unsure how to respond to such a word. Michael bought a few bars, insisting they reminded him of the land itself. "There's something honest in them," he said, tucking them into his bag. Before leaving, he asked if he could photograph her workshop. The thought made Rebecca blush, but she agreed. The shutter clicked softly, capturing not perfection, but truth. As he packed his camera, Michael said he'd return with the photos, and maybe a few stories. Rebecca watched his car disappear down the road, dust rising like a silent promise. The encounter left her heart unsteady, like a song that refused to end. That night, she looked through her grandmother's notebook again. Beside one of the recipes was a note she hadn't seen before: "The desert gives, but only to those who listen." She smiled, feeling that same strange pulse from the day she arrived. Maybe the desert had sent Michael her way. Rebecca placed a fresh bar of soap near the window, the scent of sage filling the room. She wondered where the road might take her next, and who she might become along the way. Outside, under the wide and ancient stars, the desert exhaled. The air shimmered as if alive, and for the first time, Rebecca didn't feel like a stranger there. She felt chosen. The dream snapped her awake at 2:13 a.m., heart thundering like hooves. Her mother's voice still hovered in the dark, sharp as broken glass. "You always choose fantasy over duty," it hissed, then dissolved to wind. Rebecca sat up, tasting the copper of fear, palms damp with sweat. Outside, the desert hummed its patient, ancient, low song. She lit a single candle and opened the notebook to page 13. Lavender for calm, salt for truth, sage for release. The margin read. Her hands shook as she measured, spilling a crescent of crystals. Tears slid soundlessly, salting what was already salt. She whispered, "I'm here, Mom. I'm still here, and I'm trying." Memory attacked in flashes, slammed doors, swallowed words, long silences. A young Rebecca choosing art class over accounting. Fury bloomed, her mother's jaw, a locked gate, her eyes, a weatherless sky. She had built a life around being sensible, then drowned in it. Now, a bar of soap became a raft in midnight waters. The mixture seized too fast, a stubborn, grainy mass. She breathed, slowed, and warmed the oil with gentler heat. The scent lifted, lavender, then sage, then something like sunrise. She stirred until the surface smoothed into quiet light. "Easy," she murmured. "We don't have to win, only stay." On the counter, the first bar cooled inside a cracked mold. Rebecca traced its edge, as if blessing a sleeping child. She didn't know if it would cure right by morning, but she had stood inside the storm without running. That felt like a beginning disguised as a soap. She washed her face and watched the candle gutter low. In the window, her reflection looked steadier, less haunted. The desert night pressed close, not threatening, only present. A coyote yipped somewhere beyond the junipers, then silence. Her phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then opened it slowly. A photo of her workshop, warm and golden, appeared. "Back in town tomorrow." The text read, "Got something to show you. Signed, Michael," followed by a tiny camera emoji. Rebecca exhaled, surprised to find a smile waiting. He arrived with morning light, dust silvering his boots. Michael placed a battered envelope on the kitchen table. "Thought you should see what the desert sees," he said. Inside, photographs bloomed like small, honest miracles. Soap bars glowing against motel tiles, sunlight kissing salt. One image stopped her, her own hands mid-stir, trembling. The frame caught a tear clinging to her jawline. She expected pity in it, but found steadiness instead. "May I show these at Mesa Junction Fair?" he asked. "Your story belongs where people can touch it." Fear tightened her ribs. A belt pulled one notch too far. The last fair had bruised her pride into silence. She remembered empty hours, polite smiles, shaking hands, but the little girl's voice rose again. "It smells like a hug." Rebecca inhaled, tasting courage like citrus on her tongue. "I'll go," she said, surprising them both with the certainty. Michael grinned, relief softening the lines around his eyes. "We set up Saturday. Wind can be tricky there." Wind, she thought. Always the wind, testing the tent stakes. "Then we stake deeper," she answered, almost laughing. They spent the day packing boxes, labeling, weighing. Rebecca practiced prices, practiced thank you. She cut twine with surgical attention, each knot a promise. By dusk, the living room looked like a traveling apothecary. Sage, cedar, and lavender braided the air into calm. Later, alone, she taped a note inside the cash tin. "Remember, you are not the sale. You are the story." She tucked the tin into a canvas bag and zipped it. The notebook lay open to a blank, expectant page. Her pen hovered, then wrote, "Permission granted, R." The forecast on the radio mentioned rising gusts. June texted, offering extra hands and coffee thermos. Rebecca felt the old panic reach for the doorknob. She locked eyes with the midnight bar, curing steady. "Stake deeper," she whispered, then turned out the light. They reached the fair, just as the sun cleared the mesas. White tents popped up like gulls along a dry shore. Rebecca's table looked small but sure beneath its canvas. Michael clipped prints to a wire, the images fluttering. "Looks good," he said. "Looks like it belongs." By noon, heat hammered the gravel into mirage. A warning flag snapped red near the entrance gate. The wind arrived like a rumor that turned to fact. Stakes creaked, zippers rattled, vendors grabbed four corners. Hold it, someone shouted, voice swallowed by grit. Sand hit in waves, fierce and blinding, a living wall. Rebecca's display lurched, boxes skidding like startled fish. She tasted dust, felt her heart sprint for the exit. Then June's hands were there, steady as bedrock. Michael's jacket shielded the soaps like a makeshift wing. Neighbors appeared, a sudden tribe in goggles and scarves. They braced poles, retied lines, anchored with water jugs. Strangers yelled instructions that braided into order. Rebecca knelt, rewrapping bars, breath counting to 4. Inside the chaos, a small, cool calm took root. When the gusts finally loosened their grip, applause rose ragged. Half the vendors had packed, half stubbornly reopened. Rebecca's table looked battered, earnest, still standing. Customers drifted back, faces dust-streaked, eyes bright. One woman pressed cash into her palm without haggling. They sold through the afternoon, inventory thinning to ribs. Michael's photos drew people like shade in a furnace. Who made these? Someone asked, touching the lavender bars. Rebecca lifted her chin and said, I did. The words felt like water broken from a stone dot at sunset. Only a shoebox of soaps remained. She lined them up, crooked but proud, like survivors. The fair glowed honey-gold grit sparkling like sugar. June laughed, brushing sand from Rebecca's hair. You're dusted and radiant, she said, my favorite combination. On the drive home, the sky turned bruise purple. Michael played an old folk song about roads and beginnings. They spoke little, the silence full and companionable. At the porch, he paused, eyes catching late light. I have a feeling today will photograph itself for years. Rebecca watched his taillights fade into the warm dark. Inside, she opened a storm-dusted crate to unpack. Beneath the last layer of paper lay a cassette tape. On its label, in her mother's looping hand, for Rebecca. Her breath stopped, then returned, slower, braver. She found the tape player in a kitchen drawer, half broken. The buttons stuck like old grudges, but finally clicked. Static filled the room, then a thin, careful breath. Rebecca, her mother's voice said, softer than memory. I never knew how to love without scaring it. The words staggered her more than any shouted argument. I wanted a life that wouldn't leave you hungry, it continued, but I taught you to starve your dreams instead. Rebecca pressed her palms flat to the table's cool wood. The clock ticked, unafraid of the past. Her mother told a story Rebecca had never heard. A young woman who loved color but chose numbers. A scholarship refused, a job accepted, a door closed. I mistook safety for love, the voice confessed. I demanded you make the same mistake, and you paid. Tears came, warm and clean, no longer heavy. She imagined her mother at the sink, late evening light, hands chapped, eyes tired, heart barricaded by fear. I'm sorry, the tape said, very quietly, almost shy. If I made you small, forgive the size of my worry. Rebecca rewound the last line and listened again. Forgiveness landed, not as thunder, but as rain. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just steady relief. She stood, opened windows, let the desert in, lavender met night air, and the house exhaled. She recorded her own message on a fresh tape. Mom, I'm okay. I'm learning. I wish you could see. Her voice shook, then steadied, like a lantern in wind. I'm choosing color now. I'm choosing breath. She sealed the tape inside the notebook's back pocket. In the morning, she painted the workshop door. New labels bloomed with bolder fonts. Braver names, Forgiven Cedar, Open Sky Sage, Begin Again Lavender. Women arrived and noticed, shoulders lowering an inch. The room felt taller, like they had raised a new roof. Midday, her phone rang. Michael's name lit the screen. I'm heading east along I-70 next week, he said, photographing stories carved into the roadside. He hesitated, then asked, come with me. The question hung, bright as a coin in sunlight. Rebecca looked at her curing racks, at the yellow door, at the tape tucked inside the faithful old notebook, at the horizon that had taught her how to breathe. Yes, she said, surprised by how right it felt. Let's see what the road wants to tell us. She almost backed out twice before dawn on departure day. Routine tugged like a soft, insistent child at her sleeve. Orders to ship, plants to water, 1,000 little anchors. June arrived with thermoses and that unblinking smile. Go, she said. I'll mind the hearth. You mind your heart. They met where the highway slices, the morning clean. Michael's truck smelled of coffee, dust, and film canisters. A map lay open, scarred with pencil constellations. I-70 all the way, he grinned, tapping small towns. Stories hide in the exits nobody takes. The road lifted them into mesas like red cathedrals. Silence came easy, filled with canyon wrens and wind. At a diner in Green River, the waitress knew lavender. My grandma boiled it with lemon peels, she said, smiling. Rebecca gifted her a bar named Second Sunrise. Near the ghost town of Cisco, they found a boarded store. Michael photographed her through the window's fractured light. She told him about the tape, about rain inside bones. He listened, the way strong people do, completely. Forgiveness looks good on you, he said, eyes kind. They pulled over at a turnout overlooking the San Rafael. Air so clear it felt like beginning again to breathe. Rebecca closed her eyes and spoke to the girl she'd been. You will not vanish by choosing yourself, she promised. The canyon kept her secret and promised to echo it. In a motel that smelled like oranges and chlorine, they planned tomorrow. Small towns, thrift shops, people with unhurried eyes. Michael sketched light. Rebecca sketched scents and names. They were not a couple, not a label, just a road. Something tender rode along, unclaimed and unafraid. Before sleep, she wrote one sentence in the notebook. Tell the story myself, before anyone else does. She underlined it twice, then once more, gentler. Outside, semis moaned like distant ocean in the night. Inside, her pulse found a highway all its own. The workshop hummed with soft conversation and the clink of glass jars. Rebecca had opened her doors to women from nearby towns, widows, young mothers, travelers, each carrying invisible bruises of their own. Together, they learned to blend oils, measure salt, and listen. The scent of citrus and rosemary filled the air, mingling with laughter and quiet tears. Rebecca watched them work, her heart swelling with pride. Once, this room had been a place of solitude. Now it breathed with shared strength. She realized she had built something more than a business. She had built a refuge. Healing wasn't a miracle. It was hands in motion, shaping something beautiful from what remained. Every week, more women came, drawn not by advertisements, but by whispers of warmth. The community formed like quarrels, slow, strong, intricate. Rebecca found herself learning as much as she taught. Each story told around her table became a thread in a vast tapestry of survival. One evening, as the sun turned the desert red, a young woman named Claire confessed she'd lost her sense of purpose. Rebecca handed her a bar of soap still warm from the mold. Then start here, she said. Purpose isn't found, it's made. The girl smiled faintly, tears in her eyes, and pressed the bar to her heart. That night, Rebecca stood outside the workshop, listening to the quiet hum of crickets. She thought of her grandmother, of the women before her, and of how the smallest acts could echo for generations. Healing, she realized, was never solitary. It traveled through touch, scent, and courage. Michael visited again, camera in hand, capturing the scene without words. His lens moved over their faces, their hands, the steam rising from pots. This, he said softly, is what strength looks like. Rebecca nodded, feeling the truth of it deep in her bones. When he left, the workshop glowed like an ember against the darkening sky. Rebecca lingered in the doorway, her hands scented with lavender and salt. For the first time in decades, she wasn't searching for meaning, she was living it. The morning began with laughter and the soft crackle of a radio. Rebecca was stirring a new mixture when a sudden crash startled the room. Claire had dropped a boiling pot, its contents splattering across the floor. Steam rose like smoke, and Rebecca's body reacted before thought. She rushed forward, pulling the girl away, her voice steady despite the fear pounding inside her. Claire's arm was red and blistered, but not severely burned. Still, the sight triggered something deep within Rebecca, that old, paralyzing terror of loss. Her breath caught, and for a moment she was back at her mother's bedside, helpless again. The air thickened with ghosts, but this time, she refused to let them win. She moved quickly, rinsing Claire's arm with cool water, wrapping it gently with linen. Her hands, once symbols of creation, now became instruments of care. The other women watched in silence, witnessing calm bloom from chaos. When Rebecca looked up, their eyes held something new, trust. After the shock passed, she walked alone to the nearby salt flats. The vastness of white stretched endlessly, shimmering like a sea frozen in time. The wind pressed against her skin, the taste of salt on her lips. She knelt and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me not to run." Her reflection in the glassy surface trembled, then steadied. That evening, Claire returned, shy and grateful. "You didn't panic," she said softly. You stayed. Rebecca smiled. So did you. They laughed, the sound mingling with the desert breeze. What once felt fragile now felt unbreakable. As night fell, Rebecca filled a bowl with water and dissolved salt into it, letting her fingers drift through. Healing waters, she murmured. The liquid shimmered under candlelight, mirroring the stars outside. She realized healing wasn't about mending wounds, it was about learning to live with the scars. She placed the bowl on the windowsill and watched the reflection of her own face ripple softly. The woman staring back was no longer searching for redemption. She was salt and sun and survival, raw, imperfect, alive. Weeks passed, and autumn brushed the desert in shades of bronze. One morning, Rebecca stepped outside and found a photograph tucked beneath her door, a picture of her smiling beside her soaps, the fairground glowing behind her. On the back, in Michael's handwriting, "Found this in my negatives. Thought it belonged to you." Her heart ached and warmed at once. Michael's absence had become a quiet presence, like wind that always returns. He wrote occasionally, postcards from distant towns, notes about strangers and sunsets. Rebecca treasured each one, yet she no longer waited by the door. His journey had given her something greater than companionship. It had reminded her she could walk alone. That afternoon, she gathered dried herbs under the heavy sky. The air smelled of rain, rare and sacred. She thought of how love sometimes arrives not to stay, but to awaken. Michael's face lived in her memory not as longing, but as gratitude. She whispered into the breeze, "Wherever you are, thank you." Later, she found one of his photos displayed in a local cafe, her workshop glowing, women smiling, captioned, "The hands that heal." Customers stood before it, moved. Rebecca felt her throat tighten. She hadn't realized how far her light had traveled. Sometimes, she thought, distance itself was a form of connection. That evening, she returned to her garden, lighting candles along the stone path. The air shimmered with calm. She remembered the woman who had first arrived here, broken and afraid, and almost laughed at the contrast. Every hardship, every silence, had led her here to peace earned, not gifted. She sat beneath the stars, feeling their cold fire against her skin. "Maybe we never lose people," she whispered. "Maybe they just become part of the sky we walk under." The words soothed her, lingering like perfume in the night. When the first drops of rain finally fell, Rebecca closed her eyes and lifted her face. The salt in her tears mixed with the rain's purity. Together, they tasted like release. The invitation came printed on thick paper, embossed with gold. Regional Artisan Festival, Guest of Honor, Rebecca Miller, Salt Paths, Soap Company. She read it 3 times before it felt real. The same desert that once swallowed her was now offering applause. Her hands shook slightly, but her smile held steady. The day of the fair arrived, bright and windless. The sky, a cathedral of blue. Rebecca's booth stood near the entrance, surrounded by flowers and sunlight. Crowds gathered early, drawn by the gentle aroma that floated through the air. Journalists took notes, photographers clicked cameras, and for once, Rebecca didn't shrink from attention. When her turn came to speak, she stepped onto the small stage, heart hammering but eyes clear. "A few years ago," she began, "I thought my story had ended, but sometimes endings are just desserts waiting to bloom." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "The soaps you see here aren't products, they're pieces of every woman who refused to give up." Applause rose, long and heartfelt. Rebecca scanned the faces, young, old, weathered, bright, and felt an almost holy quiet settle over her. She realized she wasn't speaking to strangers. She was speaking to reflections of her own courage, scattered through the crowd. After the ceremony, a reporter asked, "What changed your life the most?" Rebecca paused, smiling gently. "Learning that you can't control the storm," she said, "but you can decide what grows after it." The reporter nodded, eyes glistening. As the sun began to sink, the fair turned golden, everything bathed in warmth. Rebecca stood alone for a moment, watching children chase balloons through the dust. She thought of her mother, her grandmother, and Michael, all the lives entwined in her own. Gratitude rose like a tide, silent and steady. When night fell, she loaded her car with the few unsold bars. The desert stretched before her, soft and welcoming. Every mile ahead shimmered with promise, as if the stars themselves were guiding her home. The morning of her 50th birthday began in silence. Rebecca brewed coffee and stepped outside, the horizon painted in pale pinks and golds. The desert air was cool, alive with possibility. She walked barefoot across the sand, each grain warm against her skin, each breath deep and clean. For the first time in her life, she felt no rush, just presence. She carried a small basket filled with soaps, lavender, cedar, sage, and left them along the trail behind her house. Each bar was a gift to the land that had remade her. The scent mingled with the wind, carrying whispers of all she had become. She smiled softly, thinking, maybe this is what legacy smells like. At the edge of the salt flats, she stopped. The vast white surface shimmered beneath the rising sun, endless and pure. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice again. When life dries your soul, go where the salt meets the sun. Rebecca knelt, pressing her palms into the cool earth, gratitude flowing through her like light. She thought of her journey, the fear, the solitude, the small moments of grace. None of it had been wasted. Every tear had been a drop of salt shaping her strength. Every heartbreak, a lesson in tenderness. The desert hadn't broken her, it had revealed her resilience. A sudden breeze lifted her hair, scattering the scent of lavender across the flats. Rebecca laughed quietly, the sound blending with the wind. She realized the world no longer felt empty. It was vast, yes, but not lonely. A canvas painted with the stories of everyone she had ever touched. She turned back toward the house, its windows gleaming in the morning light. Behind her, the trail of soaps shimmered like small suns, a path of beauty through the barren. Rebecca whispered, "I'm home," and the words didn't echo, they settled. Belonging. As she reached the porch, she looked once more at the horizon. The salt, the sky, and her soul seemed made of the same thing, raw, luminous, enduring. She smiled, knowing that her journey had never been about finding peace. It had been about becoming it.